Hello, everyone, and welcome to Season 2, Episode 8 of the Dateable AF podcast. Today, our topic is no RSVP required, coming out late in life. The party doesn't start until you arrive.
I don't know. I had a friend that I was talking to the other day when I told her about this topic, and she said, "What the hell do y'all know about that?"
Well, because I used to think that I was sort of late to the party because I didn't come out until I was 29.
You thought, no, you're not really though.
Well, that's true. I had thought about it. I guess I didn't have any kind of experience of kissing a woman, holding hands with a woman. I didn't have any experience engaging romantically with a woman until I was 29. I had thought about it and kind of gotten some mental awareness about it a bit earlier than that, but not a lot. So, I mean, I think, you've said you knew from the time you were, 14?
Whatever age you are in 10th grade.
Yeah, like 14, 15, 16. Yeah. So anyway, it turns out there are a lot of folks who are starting the party later. But you know what? That party is still worth showing up to. It doesn't matter when you get there. We're having a good time over here.
well, when I reflect back on, I think that 10th grade was not the first part because I was really obsessed with those Jane Fonda workout videos.
Those ones with the really high cut leotards that were cut all the way up to her hip bones. Yes. She was stepping up on those little steps.
And doing those little wing things out there with her legs. Those are still, instructors still do those.
You're still relevant, Jane. You're still relevant.
Right. And then you lay on her back, and do that thrust up in the air.
I have to say, I have never looked at that and felt sexual, but oh my God, you're killing me.
I don't know that it was sexual, but I sure enjoyed watching them.
Something about Jane was very appealing to you.
Exactly. And I'm going to say to all our listeners, all you old lesbians out there, y'all know y'all watched them too, with lust in your heart. So do not be casting judgment on me.
Oh my God. Well, it turns out that there are lots of women out there who are coming out later in life. And sometimes it's after you've been married to a man like myself, or after you've had kids, also like myself. Or sometimes people have really literally lived this straight life for decades, and then they realize that they want to date someone of the same sex. So I think it's an important topic for us to dive into today.
The actually talking about this people coming out later in life, and that is happening more and more with all the time. I was looking at some data around that, and there's out of the Williams Institute, which is a UCLA based research organization, 36% of women in their 40s that have had same-sex partners that were married to men, 36% of those women, were married to men, sorry, I'm screwing up on my data here. 36% of women in their 40s with same-sex partners were married to men. Okay. Then the trend
grows. That's a pretty high percentage.
It is very high. And then the trend grows with age. So over half, like over 50% of the women that have same-sex partners were in their 50s or over. 50%
had been married to men.
Had been married to men.
Interesting.
And then it moves up to 75% for women who are 60 plus.
Wow. So what do you think explains that trend?
Well, I think a number of things. One, certainly the age thing is that happened in a time where it was not as acceptable to be out. So there were probably a number of those women who have had to age into it, go through life changes, do the things. We know a lot of women that have done this too, just
Yeah.
because it was what was expected of them.
Yep. Get married,
And
have
they doing the
kids.
married, getting the kids. And
Absolutely.
then over time, for various reasons, either they finally decide to divorce, maybe not because they're interested in a woman at the moment, but then they realize the door is open for them in ways that it hasn't been in the past, or they've always just repressed that. And so I think that is a lot in play with these women that are older and now are out or with
Yeah.
same-sex partners.
Yep, I think that's true. There's that sort of cultural generational pressure that we felt in decades past. I think also we did not have any kind of visible representation of gay people.
Yeah.
Growing up, I remember Billy Crystal on Soap. I don't know. I'm dating myself now, but
Wow.
Soap, for those of you who don't know, that was, I believe it was on HBO. That was a show that was really, really groundbreaking. And they had this gay male character, and it was scandalous, my friends. This was in the 80s. And that was literally the only representation of a gay character that I can remember growing up. And it was very, very scandalous. And then I think we had Ellen, and that was what, in the 90s, I guess, that Ellen came out on TV. But before that, for you youngsters, there were no visible gay people anywhere.
No, it's true. And also, when you reflect back on the moment, I mean, even though I laugh a lot about sort of having always been a lesbian, which I'm sure I probably have been, but you don't know what you don't know. So if you don't have any frame of reference for that, then because in 10th grade, the moment that I did have a frame of reference for that, then it made sense to me.
Yeah.
But the very second before that, I had no idea.
Yeah. I think that makes a lot of sense, because I think about my own experience of, I grew up in a very conservative Christian environment. My family was very Christian. I was surrounded by only people who had that frame of reference. And I remember there were two things. My mom had a first cousin who was lesbian, and she had a female partner for as long as I can remember. Their names were Joe and Mary Ann. And I can remember always being fascinated by them. And I didn't really know how to label it, because of course no one told us they were lesbian, but I was like, why do Joe and Mary Ann live together? And I was always asking a lot of questions about it. And then as a kid growing up, my doctor, our family doctor, was lesbian, and her partner was her nurse. And I knew that there was a relationship between the two of them. And I watched it with a lot of curiosity, but I didn't really understand what it was, because no one had ever talked to me about gay people before.
Yeah. And I do think that is oftentimes when you talk to women who have been married, that were married in a traditional sense and did the family thing, and especially if you knew you wanted kids, because back then you didn't think you could have them unless you were doing that. There's that. But I do know a number of women who realized in their marriage that they were lesbian. But they also were not, they didn't see a way out.
Yeah, because by then you're in it, you have kids.
Yeah.
And yeah, I do think there's this gap, kind of going back to your research, that younger women today realize that there's an option. And I think the older people are, the farther back you go. I didn't ever consider that it was an option for me to do anything besides get married to a man. And so that's what I did. And then I started, I think we talked about this in our very first episode, that in college, I went to a class called Feminism and Politics, just because I needed an extra government class. And I started reading all this feminist literature, and there were all these lesbians in my class, and I started getting this awareness. And it wasn't, I want to be clear for anybody who's listening who doesn't understand this concept, it wasn't like that made me want to be gay. It's like that validated something that already existed inside of me. I realized, oh, no wonder these things have happened. Like, no wonder I was curious about my doctor or my mom's cousin, because I already had that in me.
Yeah.
I just didn't have a frame of reference for it.
Yeah, right. And I know what you're saying loud and clear. It didn't make you gay. What it did was help you make sense of some things that hadn't exactly made sense to you.
Yes. That's exactly true. And so I think that sometimes there's just this, you don't have a frame of reference for something, so you compartmentalize it. And I remember looking at my gym teacher's legs in middle school, and she had these gorgeous legs. And I didn't identify that as a sexual attraction. I just remember being really fascinated by looking at her legs and thinking they were really beautiful. And so I just compartmentalized that until I started getting more awareness about it in my mid 20s.
You are kind of a leg girl.
This is true. This is true.
Joe has great legs.
Yes, my girl got some good legs.
She's got some sticks. This, I'm excited about this conversation, this part about sort of the emotional roller coaster that happens for women when they do come out, and whether or not they're gay enough. So, all the
Oh
things
my
that come into
God.
play for women that are coming out and trying to figure out how to be out, and some of them don't do a good job of being out, and it's oftentimes if they're late to the party, they still have a lot to work through related to having an open life.
Yeah. Yeah. And that comes, like you said, with so many up and down emotions. So there's this relief that, oh my God, I'm finally being authentic. I can finally be myself. Something inside of me is finally validated. And then there's this grief for those years that you kind of lost. Like, wow. I mean, I remember going through that and thinking, what would my life have been like if I had realized this earlier, like you did when you were 14 or 15? What would the trajectory of my life have looked like if I had figured it out sooner? And so there's a little bit of grief for like, oh, did I lose those years? Which of course those years are never lost. You gain a lot of experience during those times. But then there's also, as you're coming out, that fear of being judged by your family or your friends. How are they going to react to this? And then you're super excited because you're dating women for the first time, and there's this awkwardness, like you're a teenager again.
Yeah. I do think when we're younger, we have a sort of maybe a natural ability to rub against the grain a bit more outwardly.
Yeah.
We challenge thinking. It's in our nature to challenge our parents' thinking, and we just have I think a fairly high tolerance for have a thinking about things differently than
Yeah.
the way our family does or the people around us. And so I know for me that because I came out at such a young age, it I fought through a lot of that with a young person's mindset.
Yeah.
And so I was willing to take risks. And I didn't have a family, I wasn't married. I didn't have kids to think about at the time. I hadn't built all of that infrastructure around me that I would have to jump over. So I think that I fought all those hard fights at a younger age. And then by the time I got to be older, I had already worked through a lot of that. And I see people who especially have gone through marriages, and then they're trying to figure out how to navigate all of that, and your tolerance gets lower in many ways, I think, for creating conflict with your families and going against the grain and just that sort of thing.
Yeah. When you're out of your rebellious teenage years.
Mm-hmm.
That is true. I think that on the flip side of that also is that as we get older, I think we get a little more confidence. So I think about people who came out, not you, because you actually have a lot of natural self-confidence, but I think there are people who came out at a younger age and then felt that need to pretend. And so they would have a pretend boyfriend and, pretend dates, and they never were able to fully come out. By the time I came out when I was 29, I had already been to quite a bit of therapy. I had already kind of gotten my sea legs under me a little bit. So I didn't go through that phase of pretending ever. Like once I came out, I told my parents right away. Obviously my kids knew right away, my coworkers, like I didn't go through that angst of how to let people know. And so that was kind of an upside of coming out a little bit later in life.
Yes. And this plays into a bit into the type of personality you have and just generally how you lead your life. Like you lead
Yes.
your life in a very authentic way because you can't do it otherwise. Whereas there are a lot of people who, separate and aside from the gay thing, they don't lead their life in authentic ways.
Yep.
They're never really truly open or honest, or you're not really seeing them. And
Yeah.
I think that is harder for those type of people, which is a great segue into this whole idea of the impact on trying to have a relationship with someone who is coming out later in life. I have a lot of opinions about it.
Oh, I'd love to hear your opinions about it.
Some of the Moniques and Veronicas out there, uh, from my past going on 6 years, um, probably will know that they will for sure validate what I'm about to say. Is
Yes.
that I do feel I have dated some women who have been late to the party.
Yep.
And I ask a lot of questions, and I am always very curious about, and I want to know how comfortable they are in their lives and whether or not they actually live an integrated life or if they live a compartmentalized life.
Yes. Because I know you've done a little bit of both. You have been with people whose lives were not integrated, and that was a struggle.
It is a struggle. And I'm not saying that there aren't people out there that can live that life with you, but I think again, as you're thinking about dating, you have to know what you need with your partner as it relates to living your life together. And if you are two people who are comfortable living compartmental lives, and that you have a few gay friends that you hang out with, and mostly then you guys are at home by yourselves that are doing what you do, that's fine. I don't have a judgment on that. But if you are, as I have been, lived an out life for so many years where my life is uh it all of me is out all everywhere,
Mhm.
but not because I'm carrying a big flag, but because I live very authentically in this skin that I am in. And
Yes.
I don't separate my friends, whether they be straight or gay. We mix and mingle, and I expect the same privileges that all heterosexual couples get out there in the world. Doesn't always mean that it's welcome, but for the most part, it's been fine. Anyway,
Yep.
that's what I need, and that is my reticence to uh, part try to even have a relationship with somebody who compartmentalizes their life. I know it won't be a good fit for me.
Yep. And this is something to think about if you are someone who's coming out later in life, to think in advance about how integrated you're willing to be. Are you ready to come flying out of the closet? And the other thing is, you don't have to make a big declaration. This isn't you saying I'm gay and carrying a flag, as you said, but
Mm.
this is, do you feel comfortable telling your mom that the person you're dating is a woman? Do you feel comfortable telling your best friend that the person you're dating is a woman? And if the answers to those things are no, then that's going to require some work on your part. And it's going to also cause perhaps a bump in the road for the person that you're dating. Because a lot of times women, well, I would say people in general, are not that tolerant of you. I mean, for you, for example, would not date someone that forced you to feel like you were going back in the closet. Like, I'm going to introduce you to my mom, but just pretend like you're my best friend. It's like, no. So if you're someone who's coming out now and you don't feel ready to be integrated, that's just going to require some discussion with the person that you're dating.
Well, a great example of this is that in my early years, and I had a long-term relationship with a Monique that we we didn't spend holidays together because she
Yeah.
wasn't out
Yep.
to her family. And I, it over in the beginning, I accepted it because that was also, we were sort of young and doing that together. But eventually, about years into that, I stopped being happy about being somebody's best friend, and then never sharing a holiday together.
Yeah. Yep.
And so then I met a Veronica who was like, "What are you doing? I'm not going to be going to, no, we're not doing that. We're going to have holidays together and we'll travel and just do like what normal people do. They get us on Thanksgiving, we go over here on Christmas." And
Yeah.
I remember going, "Well, I'll be damned. How
Oh,
about
this is
that?
how it could be.
Oh, okay." Um, so yes, that is a great example of, if you are okay with the other way, then fine. But it's, you have to know going in, because I also know that it never changed for me. In the 10 years, it never changed.
Yeah. Yeah, and so I think just looking at the impact that coming out later in life can have on your relationships, people have always known you one way. So they've always known you as a heterosexual person. And so your train left the station a while ago. You've been thinking about dating women. You've been maybe starting to go on dates with women. And if you haven't been open with the people in your life about that process, their train hasn't left that station yet. And so they might be shocked to learn that you're now in a same-sex relationship. And so that's going to cause some bumps, or it could cause some bumps in the road, depending on who you hang out with. In my world, everyone in my life was a conservative Christian who felt that homosexuality was a sin. And so it was a big hurdle. And I lost someone who was one of my best friends in the process. I had been best friends with my sister-in-law, the wife of my husband's brother. And we had done everything together over the years. And during this time, I had literally no idea that I was gay. And when I came out, it was it was a big slap in the face to her, because she's imagining like, oh my God, this is a woman I've been on a million vacations with, that I've raised my kids next to. And for her, now viewing me through this lens of being a lesbian, she just couldn't do it. And so I ended up losing that friendship, and it broke my heart, because she was one of my favorite people in the whole world. And if you have a more open-minded friend group, I hope that doesn't happen to you, but it can. So it's something to think about.
Yes. And there is a bit of patience, I think, required, to your point, that when someone is coming out later in life and they are navigating things like kids and uh, extended family and things like that, that I will say, sometimes you just have to give grace to allow them to figure out how to put that information out there, and then understand that there's going to be some work to be done for those people around them to potentially ramp up to where they are, to accept it or not, and them getting used to that.
Yeah.
Um, and so I don't want to. I mean, I am pretty strong-willed around not wanting to be with anybody that has a compartmentalized life. At the
Yeah.
same time, I do believe that at 65, if I'm dating somebody who's in my age group and their parents 90 years old and they have dementia, then we do not need to stand up and talk about me being their girlfriend. That is no longer important. you know,
Yes,
uh,
that's a different thing than them taking you home for a holiday and pretending like you're their friend or their roommate.
absolutely.
Yeah, those are completely different things. And I
Yes.
think I would imagine we're mostly talking to an audience of women who are younger than we are. But yeah, maybe somebody's still coming out at this age, which is great.
Yeah.
So, well, let's talk about some advice and some perspective if you happen to find yourself in this place of like, oh, I've always dated men and now I think I might start dating women. The first thing I would want to say to you is that it's never too late, that there is no timeline on this, and that the most important thing is being authentic and living as your true self, whatever that looks like.
There's also this conversation. I've not done a good job of articulating this, and maybe you can help me with it a bit, but I think it is important to have a gay contingency of support and people in your life when you come out. And if you come out and you actually haven't had a lot of gay friends, and most of your long-term, very deep friendships are straight women, let's just talk about lesbians, straight women.
Yep.
That's great, and you have to figure out how they fit in all of that. But I think it's extremely important to build your bench of lesbian friends, and because it's hard to explain, but going, going places, having people to do things with, having a good contingency of women who have had the same experience you've had or are experiencing their lives similar to the way you are, I think is important. And so
So
it's,
important.
yeah. And when I've said this before to some women who don't have a strong lesbian bench, and they're like, well, I have these deep, deep, intimate relationships in my friendships. I'm like, great. And you need those and you want to keep them.
Yes.
But it is different than having this other thing.
Yep. Yeah, that community support matters so much. And just being in queer spaces, whether that's maybe a lesbian bookstore or a women's bar, if you are lucky enough to have one of those in your community,
Yeah.
that there's a sigh of relief that you breathe when there's like a hypervigilance or something that happens when you're not in a queer space. And there's just a way that your guard goes down when you're surrounded by your people in that way. So yes, don't ever discount the importance of that. And even our podcast, y'all, having this podcast as a place where we can talk about this openly or where you can message us. And I know that it's not the same as having a friend, but I do think it gives you a little slice of having that community.
Yep. And people are using, and we would continue to encourage it, because we are talking about a lot of things that people find hard to talk about, and we're pushing the topic out there and exploring it. And I feel like a handful of my friends are talking to each other about these topics, and
Yeah,
I
for
love
sure.
that. It's the podcast is opening up that because they know they're all listening to it, and then it opens up the dialogue.
Yes, I think that's really true. And I will say in my community of therapists, this is a hot topic. And one of the reasons that we selected this topic is because it does keep coming up. There are lots of women that are coming out later in life and that have had this whole life of being married to a man and maybe having kids, and now they're deciding that they want to date women. And so anyway, there's a lot of it. There's a lot of it happening out there, y'all.
Yep. Well, so what about practicing honesty from day one is a great thing to keep in your back of your mind, because I think that the more honest you are, the more forthright you are, the more likely people are to get on board with you. Because if you aren't being honest, then it makes people feel like you're not comfortable with what you're doing.
Right. And so that's hard because you may not be comfortable with what you're doing. This is all new territory. And so if you can just set a goal for yourself to be authentic, and you might be saying something like, hey, I'm newly out. I haven't dated women before. I'm still figuring this out and finding my footing. That is honesty that opens up a conversation with the person that you might potentially be dating.
Right. Now, for me, if I ran into somebody and they said I'm newly out, I would turn and run screaming the other way, but that would just be
But don't
because
let that scare you off. If
no,
you are later in life coming out, there are women out there who will date you, I promise. Just not Rachel.
it's just not me. I'm too far down the road to be somebody's coach or mentor.
Right. Yes. You've aged out of that
I have.
particular phase of life. But you know, I think going back to what you were saying before is like, find your people. If you're newly out, and maybe your people are not going to be a group of older women. Maybe you're finding your people that are younger women who are still finding their footing too. But go out, go to queer spaces, go to queer events, start building friendships and building that community, because that's going to help you as you're going through this process.
And don't see the apps as your community. people.
No,
That's not your
girl.
community.
Mm-mm.
You know, we lesbians have fun. We play water volleyball. We play mahjong. We go listen to music. And uh and you just need to get out there. That's why, again, it's very important to begin to build your bench, uh, so that you can enjoy those activities, meet other women that way, and then they make it so much easier for you to begin to be yourself in that
Yes.
space.
Yes. And if you are going to use the apps, which it's okay, that's fine. They can be kind of overwhelming, but they can also be a practical way to meet other women. Just make sure that you're being authentic, as we always say. Highlight your shared interests with this person, not just the sexuality aspect of things. And if your first ones don't stick, it's okay. It's a learning curve. Just keep trying. And all the while, do put yourself in real life situations as well. Don't use the apps as your sole method of dating.
Yes, when you're first coming out, you need practice.
Yeah. To get the training wheels off, you
You
gotta you
need
gotta
practice being a lesbian.
learn how to ride that bike. And on that note, you also like learn a little bit about lesbian culture and be funny about it. You know, Rachel and I laugh all the time about the U-Haul stereotype and about being best friends with your ex, and the small size of the dating pool. We've talked about all these things on this podcast. Those are things that are different than they are in the heterosexual community. So you learn those things and let yourself laugh about them.
Yeah, I do think, again, I hope one thing, if you don't take anything else away from us, is that you be curious and be playful, and you have to laugh at yourself, because we do this as queer women. We do a bunch of ridiculous stuff too
Yes.
in the process of coming out. We do some ridiculous things, and so you have to laugh, enjoy it.
Yes, absolutely. And in this process, don't forget to set your own pace, because sometimes if you're coming out later in life, you feel this need to catch up. Like, oh, everyone else is married. They've been with their partner for many years. And so I got to jump right in and find my forever person. It's like, no, there's no need to jump straight into a serious relationship. Give yourself time to find the right person or the right people to spend your time with. So date casually, take some breaks, just give yourself permission to move at whatever speed feels right for you. This is your own journey.
Yes. And we don't have enough time in this episode, but there is also a very, and we might just want to extend it, but there's also the whole idea of being bisexual that comes into play in all of this. And
Yeah.
that is whether or not you are fluid, and you're thinking, well, I'm going to float into women now, but I might float back to men. Who knows? And that's a different conversation as well.
Yeah, for sure. And what I'll say about that is that if you are someone who's looking for a monogamous long-term relationship, I don't think it matters so much that you're bisexual. Again, this could be a whole other topic, but what matters is, do you feel good with the person that you're with right now? Or so for example, if you're with men, but you're constantly feeling attracted to women, you're going to be miserable.
Mhm.
And vice versa. If you're trying to make yourself be with a woman, but you're constantly looking over your shoulder at the hot guy next door, that's problematic. So love the one you're with, like
because you, because if you're with a man and you're going to find yourself creeping next door to your neighbor's
that's
house
right. That's right. So that's no good for
whenever her
anybody.
husband's gone. And the next thing you know, it's going to be all the young girls love Alice scenario. You're going to be over there doing bad things, and the husband's going to come home and kill you.
That's right. That's right. Don't let it happen. So, don't focus too much on what your sexual orientation is overall, is what I would say. Is that if in this moment you're attracted to this person, be with that person and be monogamous with that person if that's what you decide to do. If you're constantly floating back and forth, I might just suggest that you would go talk to a therapist about that. But, you know, but if you can't be with the person that you're with, that could be an issue. But if you're attracted to both men and women, like, okay, but love the one you're with right now.
Oh my
Oh,
God.
goodness. Well, there's nothing inherently good or bad about coming out younger or coming out later in life. And so just remember that, lesbians date women who come out at different stages of life. And so just be mutually understanding of each other, be respectful of each other, and try to learn from each other. It's coming out's a process. It's not necessarily one big event.
Right. And as we have talked about or described on this show, that sometimes the way you come out is actually related to the type of person that you are in general, not the fact that you're coming out late. So
Yes.
there are some people who, like Sarah, whose life is very authentic, and so she had to come out and be authentic when she realized it, versus some people who live a compartmentalized life anyway, and when they come out, they're doing it that way.
Yep. And there's not necessarily a right or wrong way. I think it's much more stressful to be inauthentic. So just keep that in mind.
Just saying.
Okay. Well, let's wrap this up. What are some of the key takeaways that we want our listeners to get from this episode?
Well, for sure, don't put so much pressure on yourself. And everyone has their own timeline.
Yes, absolutely. Second takeaway that I would love for you to get from this is be honest, be authentic, mostly with yourself, but also figure out how to be authentic with your friends and your family and your potential dating partners. Don't try to be more or less gay than you are. Just let people in on your process, and that authenticity really builds deeper relationships.
Yep. And then we talked about being compassionate, and that giving people a little space to adjust to their new normal.
Yes. Yeah. If they've always known you one way and now all of a sudden you're making this big announcement, it's going to take them a minute. So be patient with them and be compassionate with them. Also, I cannot stress this enough. Find a supportive community. Find your people that can support you in the coming out process, because this is so important to have validation, to have universality, to find other people who get what you're going through. So don't give up on your search to find that.
Amen, sister.
Amen, sister. Well, as always, please send us your coming out stories. We've both told you ours. We would love to hear yours. If you're in the process of coming out and you need some support, don't hesitate to reach out to us. And we always love hearing from you. So the best way to get in touch with us, you can email us info@dateableaf.com. You can also DM us on Instagram @dateableaf. If you want to talk about this topic with your partner, so you have some points of discussion during the week before our next episode comes out. If you and your partner don't know the details of each other's coming out stories, like including your internal process, like what you went through, take some time to share this in depth with each other and talk with your partner about the pros and cons of coming out earlier versus coming out later. As always, thank you for listening to the Dateable AF podcast, where we help you find your happy ending.
Remember, be bold, be kind, and for the love of queer dating, don't text your ex. Stay dateable.
AF.